I waited all day at the hospital door. My son never came. At midnight, he found out that. The sterile smell of antiseptic hit my nostrils as I sat on the hard plastic chair outside the operating room. The clock on the wall read 7:15 a.m. My heart thumped against my ribs like a caged animal trying to escape. The surgeon had explained that Margaret's procedure would take about 6 hours. 6 hours of waiting, praying, and hoping that my wife of 43 years would pull through. Mr. Harrington, a nurse with kind eyes touched my shoulder. We're taking your wife into surgery now. Would you like to see her beforehand? I nodded, my throat too constricted to speak. The nurse led me through the double doors where Margaret lay on a gurney, her silver hair splayed across the pillow, making her look like she had a halo. The tubes and monitoring equipment surrounding her made my stomach clench. James, she whispered, her voice raspy from the pre-op medication. Don't you worry about me, I'll be fine. Even now, she was trying to comfort me. Did you call Michael? Is he coming? Of course, I lied, squeezing her hand. He'll be here soon. I hadn't been able to reach our son, but I didn't want Margaret worried before her surgery. Michael would come, he had to. This was his mother's heart valve replacement, for God's sake. I'd left 3 voicemails and sent several texts. I love you, Maggie, I said, using the nickname only I was allowed to use. Love you too, old man, she smiled weakly. Remember, no matter what happens, nothing's going to happen, I interrupted. You'll be out of here in no time. The anesthesiologist stepped in, signaling it was time. I kissed Margaret's forehead, inhaling her familiar scent one last time before they wheeled her away. Back in the waiting room, I checked my phone again. No response from Michael. I called again, straight to voicemail. Michael, it's Dad again. Mom's going into surgery now. Please come to Memorial Hospital as soon as you get this. She's asking for you. I pocketed my phone and settled in for the long wait. I'd brought a paperback Western novel, one of the simple pleasures I allowed myself after a lifetime of hard work. At 68, I'd earned these small indulgences. The book remained unopened as my mind wandered through memories of building our life together. Margaret and I had started with nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was 25 when we married, working 2 jobs, daytime construction, and night shifts at a warehouse. Margaret worked as a secretary while putting herself through nursing school. We lived in a tiny apartment in Queens where the radiator clanged all night and the neighbors fought loud enough to wake the dead. But we had dreams, big ones. By the time Margaret got pregnant with Michael 7 years later, we had saved enough for a down payment on a small house in New Jersey. It wasn't much, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a yard the size of a postage stamp. But it was ours. I spent weekends fixing leaky faucets, patching the roof, and building a swing set for our son while Margaret planted a small vegetable garden out back. Every spare penny went toward building a better life. Margaret eventually became a registered nurse, working at this very hospital. I started my own contracting business, Harrington Construction. The early years were lean and brutal. I worked 16-hour days, coming home with hands so calloused they sometimes bled, my back screaming in pain. But it paid off. By the time Michael was in high school, business was booming. We moved to a larger house in a good school district. Margaret could cut back her hours. We even took our first real vacation, a week in Florida where we marveled at having nothing more pressing to do than watch the waves roll in. Michael was our pride and joy, smart as a whip, good-looking, popular. We made sure he had everything we didn't: the right clothes, sports equipment, SAT prep courses, and eventually, a fully paid education at Rutgers University. No student loans for our boy, no working through college like we had. We wanted him focused solely on his future. I checked my watch. 9:30 a.m., still no word from Michael. I tried his wife, Rebecca. Hi, James. Her voice was oddly formal. Is everything okay? Margaret's in surgery, heart valve replacement. I've been trying to reach Michael all morning. Oh, a pause. He's in meetings all day. Really important client. This is his mother, Rebecca. Can you get a message to him? Another pause. I'll try, but you know how he is when he's focused on work. I did know. My son had become a workaholic investment banker who measured success in dollars and deals. Sometimes I wondered if we'd done him a disservice by giving him too much. Just tell him to come when he can. We're at Memorial. Of course. I hope everything goes well. The call ended, leaving me with a hollow feeling. Something in Rebecca's tone didn't sit right. but I pushed the thought aside. The waiting room television droned on about stock market fluctuations and weather forecasts as the clock ticked forward with excruciating slowness. At noon, a different nurse approached. "Mr. Harrington, the surgery is progressing well. Dr. Patel wanted you to know they've successfully replaced the valve and are beginning to close up. It should be another hour or so." Relief flooded through me. Thank you so much." I decided to get some lunch from the cafeteria, hoping to see Michael when I returned. The hospital food was bland, but I hardly tasted it anyway. My mind was too busy conjuring up scenarios to explain my son's absence. Maybe his phone died. Maybe he was stuck in traffic on the New Jersey Turnpike. Maybe Rebecca never gave him the message. I returned to the waiting room, and at 2:15 p.m., Dr. Patel emerged in his surgical scrubs, his mask pulled down around his neck. "Mr. Harrington," he extended his hand. "I'm happy to report the surgery went very well. We replaced the mitral valve successfully, and your wife's heart is responding beautifully. She's in recovery now." My legs nearly gave out. "When can I see her?" "She'll be in the ICU for the next 24 hours for close monitoring. You can see her briefly in about an hour, but she'll be very groggy from the anesthesia." I thanked him profusely, then immediately tried Michael again. Voicemail. I texted, "Mom's surgery went well. She's in recovery. Please come when you can." At 3:30 p.m., I was allowed to see Margaret for 5 minutes. She was pale, connected to machines that beeped and hummed, monitoring every aspect of her recovering body. Her eyes fluttered open when I took her hand. "James," she mumbled, "I'm here, Maggie. Everything went perfectly." Her eyes darted around the room. "Michael," my heart sank. He's on his way." Her eyelids drooped closed again, the drugs pulling her back under. I stood there, watching her chest rise and fall, thanking God for sparing her life and silently cursing my son for his absence. Back in the waiting room, I called Michael's office directly. "Larson Partners, how may I direct your call?" The receptionist's voice was professionally cheerful. "Michael Harrington, please. This is his father." "It's an emergency." "I'm sorry Mr. Harrington is out of the office today." I froze. "What? He's not in today. Would you like his voicemail?" "No, thank you." I hung up, confusion turning to anger. If he wasn't at work, where the hell was he? I called Rebecca again. "James, I told Michael about Margaret. He said he'd try to get there as soon as possible. The receptionist at his office says he's not at work today." A long pause. "Oh well, he must be working from home then, or at a client site." Her voice wavered, and in that moment I knew she was lying. After 43 years in construction, dealing with suppliers, subcontractors, and clients trying to cut corners, I developed a finely tuned bullshit detector. Something was very wrong. I spent the rest of the afternoon alternating between brief visits to Margaret's bedside and the uncomfortable chair in the waiting room. By 8 p.m., I was exhausted, hungry, and increasingly worried. Not about Margaret. Her doctors assured me she was recovering beautifully, but about my son's inexplicable absence. The night shift nurse, a young woman named Tara with a Caribbean accent, took pity on me. "Mr. Harrington, there's a cot in the family room down the hall. Why don't you try to get some rest? I promise to call you if there's any change with your wife." I nodded gratefully and made my way to the small room she indicated. It had a vinyl sofa that converted to a narrow cot, a mini fridge, and a small bathroom. I stretched out, not expecting to sleep, but exhaustion pulled me under almost immediately. The vibration of my phone woke me at 11:47 p.m. I fumbled for it in the darkness, heart racing. "Hello?" My voice was rough with sleep. "Dad?" It was Michael, finally. "Where the hell have you been?" I didn't bother hiding my anger. "Your mother's been in surgery all day." "I know, I'm sorry. How is she?" "She's going to be fine, no thanks to you. She's been asking for you." I couldn't get away, I had. Commitments more important than your mother's heart surgery?" The rage I'd been suppressing all day boiled over. "What kind of son are you?" "Dad, it's complicated. I'll explain everything tomorrow. I promise I'll be there first thing in the morning." "You'd better be." I hung up, too angry to continue the conversation. Sleep was impossible now. I decided to check on Margaret one more time before the ICU closed to visitors at midnight. As I approached her room, I noticed Tara speaking quietly with another nurse at the station. They both looked my way, their expressions too sympathetic. "Is something wrong with my wife?" My heart pounded. No, Mr. Harrington." Mrs. Harrington is stable, Tara assured me. It's just, she exchanged glances with her colleague. What? I'm not sure if I should say anything, but, she bit her lip. My cousin works at the Greenwich Hotel. She just texted me because she recognized your son from the photos in your wife's room. Michael is at a hotel? In Greenwich? Greenwich, Connecticut, was only about 45 minutes from the hospital. Tara nodded uncomfortably. She said he's been there since yesterday, with a woman. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. A woman, not his wife? No, sir, my cousin said they seemed very familiar with each other. My mind reeled. Michael had been at a luxury hotel with another woman while his mother underwent heart surgery, while I sat waiting for him hour after hour. Thank you for telling me, I managed to say. I returned to the family room in a daze, collapsing onto the cot. My son, the boy we'd sacrificed everything for, the young man whose education we'd prioritized over our own retirement savings, the adult whose career we'd celebrated with such pride, had chosen an affair over his own mother's critical surgery. As midnight struck, I stared at the ceiling, the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. The missed family dinners, the vague excuses, Rebecca's strained voice on the phone. It wasn't just today. Something fundamental had changed in my son, and I hadn't wanted to see it. Morning came with harsh fluorescent lights and the sounds of the hospital waking up. I washed my face in the small bathroom sink, the mirror reflecting a haggard old man I barely recognized. I needed to pull myself together for Margaret. She couldn't know about this, not while she was recovering. Dr. Patel stopped by during his morning rounds. Mrs. Harrington had a very good night. Her vitals are strong, and we're seeing excellent cardiac function. If this continues, we'll move her to a regular room tomorrow. I thanked him, genuinely grateful for the good news about Margaret, though my heart remained heavy with the revelation about Michael. At 9:15 a.m., Michael finally appeared, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a bouquet of flowers that looked like they'd been hastily purchased from the hospital gift shop. Dad, he approached cautiously, reading my expression. How's Mom? Better than you deserve, I replied coldly. She's down the hall, room 412 in the ICU. You have 10 minutes with her. Make them count. He hesitated, sensing my fury. Dad, about yesterday? Not now, I cut him off. Your mother needs to see you. That's all that matters right now. I watched him walk toward the ICU, his shoulders tense. The confident swagger he usually carried was notably absent. Good, I thought. Let him squirm. While he visited Margaret, I stepped outside to call Rebecca. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for my call. James. How's Margaret? Recovering well? Michael finally showed up. Silence. Rebecca, I know he was at the Greenwich Hotel yesterday with another woman. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed what I already knew. James, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you, but how long has this been going on? She sighed deeply. Almost a year. Her name is Vanessa. She's a client, or was initially. Does Margaret know? No, I don't think so. Michael's been very careful. The word choice made my stomach turn. Careful, like his affair was just another investment strategy to be managed. I'm sorry you got dragged into this, Rebecca. Me too, her voice cracked. For what it's worth, I've told him repeatedly to end it, to remember his values, the ones you and Margaret taught him. The irony was bitter. Apparently those lessons didn't stick. After hanging up, I sat on a bench outside the hospital entrance, breathing in the cool morning air. The manicured hospital grounds were beginning to bloom with early spring flowers. Margaret would have named each variety. She always noticed beautiful things, even in stark settings like hospitals. Michael emerged from the entrance 30 minutes later, scanning the area until he spotted me. She's sleeping again, he said, approaching cautiously. The nurse said that's normal. Sit down. I gestured to the empty space beside me. He complied, maintaining a careful distance. Up close, I could see the signs of strain around his eyes, the carefully combed hair that didn't quite hide the fact he hadn't slept well. I know about Vanessa, I said without preamble. His head snapped toward me, eyes wide. How did you? It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that while your mother was having her chest cut open, you were with your mistress at the Greenwich Hotel. He opened his mouth, closed it, then stared at his expensive shoes. It's complicated, Dad. No, it's actually very simple. You made a choice, and it wasn't us, it wasn't your mother. I never meant to hurt anyone. The platitude ignited my rage again. Bullshit. You're not a child, Michael. You're 43 years old. You know exactly what you're doing and who you're hurting." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his teenage self that it momentarily threw me. "Vanessa and I, it's serious, Dad. We're planning a future together. And what about Rebecca, your wife of 15 years, the mother of your children?" He winced. "We've grown apart, it happens. It happens when you let it happen, when you stop putting in the work. When you look for the easy way out instead of honoring your commitments." "Like you're one to talk about the easy way," he muttered. "Excuse me?" "Nothing," he shook his head. "No, you don't get to throw out comments like that and then retreat. Say what you mean." His jaw tightened. "Fine, you and Mom have always taken the hard road, always struggling, always sacrificing. For what? A modest house in the suburbs? A construction company that barely turned a profit until I helped you modernize it? You could have been so much more if you'd been willing to take risks, to seize opportunities." I stared at him, stunned by the contempt in his voice. "We built a life we're proud of. We raised you with values and opportunities we never had. And I'm grateful, but the world has changed, Dad. Success looks different now." "Does success look like abandoning your family? Lying to everyone who loves you?" He stood abruptly. "I didn't come here for a lecture, I came to see Mom. I'll be back this evening." "Michael," my voice stopped him, "your mother can never know about this, not while she's recovering. Not ever, if I can help it." He nodded stiffly before walking to the parking lot where his black BMW gleamed in the morning sun, another symbol of the success he'd prioritized over everything else. I returned to Margaret's room where she was now awake, looking marginally better than yesterday. "Michael came," she said, her voice stronger. "Yes, he had to get back to work, but he'll return this evening." Her face brightened. "He looked good, didn't he? So handsome in that suit." I forced a smile. "Spitting image of you." "Oh, stop it." She waved a weak hand. "He has your jawline and your stubbornness." If only he had inherited more than that, I thought. Over the next few days, Margaret's recovery progressed remarkably well. By the fourth day, she was moved to a regular room. By the seventh, she was taking short walks down the corridor with the physical therapist. Michael visited every evening, always immaculately dressed, always bearing gifts. Flowers, gourmet chocolates Margaret couldn't eat yet, silk scarves to hide the surgical scar at her collarbone. I maintained a civil facade in front of Margaret, but each night after she fell asleep, I returned to our empty house and researched Michael's affair in obsessive detail. Through social media, which I rarely used but now scoured like a detective, I found Vanessa Laurent, a divorced investment banker 5 years older than Michael. Her Instagram showed a carefully curated life of business-class travel, exclusive restaurants, and luxury hotel stays. Several photos included glimpses of a man's hand, a suited shoulder, the back of a head with hair the same color as Michael's. Never his face. They were careful, indeed. I also discovered, through careful questioning of our longtime family accountant, that Michael had been making increasingly risky investments with his own money. He'd leveraged himself significantly to maintain the lifestyle he thought he deserved. The Westchester County home, private schools for his children, luxury vacations, and now, apparently, a mistress with expensive tastes. What troubled me most, however, was learning that Michael had begun pressuring Margaret 6 months ago to simplify our financial arrangements. He'd suggested we put him on our accounts in case of emergency. He'd offered to help modernize my construction business by bringing in partners who could take it to the next level. He'd even broached the subject of selling our house, which was fully paid off, to move into a more manageable condo. We'd resisted, gently. Margaret and I were comfortable with our modest but stable financial situation. Harrington Construction employed 35 people and provided us a good income. Our house, while perhaps too large for just the two of us now, was our home. It held 40 years of memories. But now, with the knowledge of Michael's double life, these suggestions took on a sinister tone. Was he trying to gain control of our assets? Was he in financial trouble despite his apparent success? Or was he simply viewing us, his aging parents, as resources to be optimized like everything else in his calculator of a life? 2 weeks after Margaret's surgery, she was released from the hospital. Michael insisted on hiring a private nurse to help with her recovery at home, overriding my objections that I was perfectly capable of caring for my wife. "Dad, you're almost 70, he'd said patronizingly. "Mom needs professional care." Margaret, still weak and eager to keep the peace, had agreed. So Nurse Diane moved into our guest room for the next month, administering medications, changing dressings, and monitoring Margaret's vital signs. I found myself increasingly sidelined in my own home. Michael called daily to speak with Diane about Margaret's progress, often not even asking to talk to me. He scheduled doctor's appointments without consulting me and ordered groceries to be delivered despite my insistence that I enjoyed my trips to the market. One evening, about 3 weeks into this arrangement, I overheard Michael and Diane talking in low voices in the kitchen. "The recovery is going well, but it's the long term I'm concerned about," Diane was saying. "Your father seems resistant to changes that would make their lives easier." "He's always been stubborn," Michael replied. "Set in his ways. Well, at some point, they'll need to consider assisted living. This house has too many stairs, too much maintenance. I've been telling them that for months. Maybe you could help convince them. As a healthcare professional, I could try, but ultimately it's their decision. Sometimes people need guidance to make the right decisions," Michael said smoothly, "especially as they age." I retreated silently, fury building in my chest. They were talking about us as if we were children, incapable of managing our own affairs. As if the house I had maintained meticulously for decades was suddenly an insurmountable burden. As if Margaret and I, who had navigated life's challenges for nearly half a century, couldn't be trusted to know what was best for ourselves. That night, I lay awake beside Margaret, listening to her steady breathing, turning over recent events in my mind. Michael's affair, his financial overextension, his sudden interest in our assets and living arrangements, his efforts to insert himself between us and our medical care, our home management, our daily lives. A disturbing picture was emerging. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to drive a car, was systematically attempting to take control of our lives. And for what purpose? To fund his double life. To access our modest but stable assets? The thought was so painful I could barely breathe. I slipped out of bed and went downstairs to the den, where I kept important documents in a fireproof safe. I spent the night reviewing our will, our financial statements, the ownership papers for Harrington Construction. Margaret and I had always planned to leave everything to Michael. It had seemed the natural course of things. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I called my old friend Howard Kleinman, who had retired from his law practice 5 years ago but still consulted occasionally. We'd worked together for decades. His firm handled all the contracts for Harrington Construction, and I trusted him implicitly. "Jim, how's Margaret doing?" His familiar voice was comforting. "Much better, thanks. But I need some legal advice, Howard, confidential advice." "Of course. What's going on?" I explained my concerns about Michael, careful to stick to verifiable facts rather than emotions or suspicions. Howard listened silently until I finished. "That's troubling," he said finally, "especially the pressure to put him on your accounts. Have you discussed this with Margaret?" "Not yet. She's still recovering and she adores Michael. This would break her heart." "I understand, but Jim, you need to protect yourselves, both of you. That's why I'm calling." "Good. Here's what we'll do. First, we'll create a revocable trust to hold your assets instead of relying solely on a will. Second, we'll establish clear conditions for any transfer of business control. Third, we'll set up a financial power of attorney, but not with Michael as the agent. Who then? I'd recommend a fiduciary. Someone with legal obligation to act in your best interests. I can recommend several." "What about you?" he chuckled. "I'm flattered, but I'm older than you are, Jim. You need someone who'll outlive us both." We talked for another hour, making plans to protect Margaret and me from what I still couldn't bring myself to fully articulate: the possibility that our only child was plotting to exploit us. Over the next month, as Margaret grew stronger, I implemented Howard's suggestions discreetly. I met with financial advisors, updated our estate planning, and secured our assets. I didn't mention any of this to Michael, who continued his campaign of helpful suggestions about our living situation, our finances, and Harrington Construction. I also didn't mention it to Margaret, which filled me with guilt. We had never kept secrets from each other. But how could I tell her that the son she adored might be manipulating us for his own gain? That the same son had been carrying on an affair while she underwent life-saving surgery? It would devastate her. Instead, I focused on her recovery, taking over more of her care as Nurse Diane's time with us came to an end. We resumed our normal routines, Morning coffee on the patio, evening television in the den, weekend drives to our favorite spots along the Jersey Shore. With each passing day, Margaret regained her strength and vitality. But the knowledge of Michael's betrayal ate at me constantly. I found myself watching him during his weekly visits, analyzing his every word for hidden meanings, second-guessing his every offer of help. The easy trust I'd once placed in my son was shattered beyond repair. 6 weeks after Margaret's surgery, she was cleared to resume most normal activities. Michael suggested we celebrate with dinner at Le Bernardin, an extravagant restaurant in Manhattan that Margaret had always wanted to try. My treat, he insisted, to celebrate Mom's recovery and to thank you, Dad, for being her rock through all this. The irony wasn't lost on me, but Margaret was so delighted by the prospect that I agreed. We made reservations for Friday evening, with Michael offering to drive us into the city. The night before our dinner, I received an unexpected call from Rebecca. "James, I need to warn you about something," she said without preamble. "Michael is planning to talk to you and Margaret about some major changes tomorrow at dinner." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of changes?" "He wants you to sell the house and move to a continuing care community in Florida. He's already put down a deposit on a unit there. Without discussing it with us, he says it's refundable, that he's just exploring options for your future." I could hear the skepticism in her voice. "But James, there's more. He's been talking to potential buyers for Harrington Construction. He claims it's just preliminary discussions, but he has no authority to sell my company," I finished, anger rising. "What the hell is he thinking?" "I don't know," she paused. I think he needs money, a lot of it." "For what?" Another pause. "He's leaving me for her. He wants a divorce, and he knows I'll fight for my fair share, especially with the children to consider. And Vanessa has expensive tastes. The prenup he's drafted is generous, to say the least." The pieces clicked into place. Michael needed liquid assets quickly to finance his new life with his mistress while still providing for the family he was abandoning. And he saw his aging parents as the solution to his financial problems. "Thank you for telling me, Rebecca. I still care about Margaret, and you." Her voice broke slightly. "You've always been good to me, even when Michael wasn't. You deserve better than this." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for a long time. The depth of Michael's betrayal was almost incomprehensible. He wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was attempting to dismantle our entire lives, our home, my business, our independence, to fund his selfish desires. I slept fitfully that night, and in the morning I made a decision I'd been avoiding for weeks. I had to tell Margaret the truth, all of it. She deserved to know who our son had become before we sat across from him at that restaurant table. I found her in the garden, tending to her roses with careful hands still slightly weakened from her surgery. The morning sun caught her silver hair, and for a moment I saw the young woman I'd fallen in love with nearly 50 years ago. She'd always had that quiet grace, that gentle strength. "Maggie," I said, sitting beside her on the garden bench. "We need to talk about Michael." She looked up, concern immediately crossing her features. "Is something wrong?" "Yes." I took her hands in mine, soil and all. "I've discovered some things, difficult things, that you need to know before we have dinner with him tonight." Slowly, gently, I told her everything. About Michael's affair with Vanessa, about his absence during her surgery, about his financial manipulations and his plans to sell our house and my company, about his impending divorce from Rebecca. Margaret listened in silence, her face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, tears streamed down her cheeks. "Are you certain?" she whispered. "About all of it?" "Yes, I've verified everything. Rebecca confirmed most of it last night." She nodded slowly, then looked out at her garden, the roses she'd tended for decades. "I've known something was wrong, a mother knows, but I thought perhaps he was just stressed with work or having normal marital problems." She looked back at me, eyes clear despite her tears. "I never imagined he could be so calculating. I'm sorry, Maggie, I wanted to protect you. We can't protect each other from the truth, James, no matter how painful." She squeezed my hands. "What do we do now?" "We could cancel dinner." She shook her head firmly. "No, I want to hear what he has to say. I want to look in his eyes when he tries to convince us to uproot our lives for his benefit." Her strength didn't surprise me. Margaret had always been the backbone of our family, steel beneath her gentle exterior. "Then we'll go," I agreed, "but we'll be prepared." We spent the day strategizing, discussing our options, our boundaries. For the first time, we talked openly about the possibility that our relationship with our only child might be permanently damaged. It was heartbreaking, but there was also relief in facing the reality together, without secrets between us. That evening, Michael arrived precisely at 6, driving a new Mercedes I hadn't seen before. He complimented Margaret effusively on how well she looked, played the devoted son all the way into Manhattan, and maintained a stream of light conversation as we were seated at our table in Le Bernardin. Only after the appetizers had been served did he begin his carefully rehearsed pitch. "Mom, Dad, I've been thinking a lot about your future, about how to make sure you're comfortable and secure as you get older." Margaret and I exchanged glances but said nothing. "I've found an amazing continuing care community in Naples, Florida, beautiful apartments, top-notch medical facilities on site, activities, restaurants. It's like living in a resort." "That sounds expensive," I commented neutrally. "Well, yes, quality care costs money, but here's the thing. If you sell the house, you'll have more than enough. Property values in your neighborhood have skyrocketed." "We like our house," Margaret said softly. "All our memories are there. Of course, and I understand that attachment, but it's a lot to maintain, especially as you get older, and winters in New Jersey aren't getting any easier to handle." I cut into my sea bass. "What about Harrington Construction?" Michael's eyes flickered with something, surprised that I'd made the connection, perhaps. "Actually, I've been approached by a development group that's very interested in acquiring smaller, established construction companies. The offer they're discussing is substantial. And you've been discussing this without my knowledge or consent. Just preliminary talks, Dad, just exploring options for when you're ready to retire." "I see." I set down my fork. "And when did you decide that Rebecca and the children no longer fit into your future plans?" The color drained from his face. "What?" "Your affair with Vanessa Laurent," Margaret said, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "Your plans to divorce Rebecca. We know everything, Michael." He glanced around nervously, then leaned forward. "This isn't the place to discuss personal matters." "No," I agreed. "The place would have been at your mother's hospital bedside, where you were conspicuously absent because you were too busy at the Greenwich Hotel with your mistress." His jaw tightened. "That's not fair. I came as soon as I could. 28 hours after her surgery," I corrected, "after spending the night with Vanessa while I sat alone, wondering if my wife would survive. I made a mistake." "I'm sorry. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary," Margaret said. "What you did was make a choice, just like you're choosing now to try to dismantle our lives to fund your new one with this woman." Michael's carefully constructed facade cracked. "You don't understand. Vanessa and I—" "Save it," I interrupted. "We're not interested in the rationalizations you've created to justify betraying everyone who loves you." "I'm not betraying anyone. I'm trying to help you. You're getting older, you need proper care. We're perfectly capable of determining what we need," Margaret countered. "We've been doing it successfully for decades." Michael's expression hardened. "Fine, clearly you've made up your minds. But at least consider my offer about the company. The developer is willing to pay $7 million. I nearly choked on my water. $7 million? Harrington Construction isn't worth anywhere near that. It is with the land you own on Route 17. They want to build a commercial complex there." Now I understood. The 5 acres I'd purchased 30 years ago as a possible expansion site for the company had recently been rezoned for commercial use. Its value had increased exponentially, though I'd had no plans to sell. "So that's what this is really about, the Route 17 property." Michael had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "It's a good deal, Dad. For everyone, except for the 35 people who work for me, who have helped build this company. What happens to them in this good deal?" He shrugged. "Business decisions sometimes require tough choices." "Like choosing between your wife and your mistress?" Margaret asked pointedly. "Between your family and your greed?" The rest of the dinner passed in strained silence. Michael attempted several times to revive the conversation, to steer it back to his proposals, but Margaret and I remained unmoved. When the check came, he insisted on paying as promised, though the gesture felt hollow now. Outside the restaurant, as we waited for the valet to bring the car, Michael made one last attempt. "Think about what I've said, please. The Florida property is really beautiful, and the business offer won't be on the table forever." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. A man consumed by ambition and self-interest, willing to sacrifice anything and anyone for his desires. A man who bore my name but none of my values. "We'll think about it," I said finally, "but not in the way you hope." The drive home was silent and tense. Michael dropped us off with minimal conversation, promising to call in a few days when everyone's had time to cool down. As Margaret and I prepared for bed that night, she sat at her vanity, slowly removing her earrings, the pearl ones I'd given her for our 30th anniversary. "What are we going to do, James?" she asked, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "About Michael or about our future? Both, I suppose." I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. "I don't know if we can fix what's broken with Michael. I'm not sure we should try," she nodded sadly. "And our future? That's clearer. We stay right here in our home. I continue running Harrington Construction until I'm ready to pass it on to someone who shares our values. Maybe Tony Rodriguez, my foreman. He's been with me 20 years. I paused. "And we update our will. Michael will still inherit something. He's our son despite everything, but not everything and not without conditions." Margaret turned to face me. "What about the Route 17 property?" I smiled, an idea forming. "I have thoughts about that, but first I need to make some calls tomorrow." The next morning, I contacted Howard Kleinman again, outlining my plan. He listened, asked clarifying questions, and finally said, "It's unorthodox, Jim, but legal, and I have to say rather poetic. Can you draw up the necessary paperwork? Give me a week." Next, I called Tony Rodriguez and asked him to meet me for lunch. Over sandwiches at our usual deli, I shared my concerns about outside developers eyeing Harrington Construction. "They just want the Route 17 land," Tony said immediately. "The company itself isn't worth that much to them." "Exactly, which is why I'm considering a different succession plan." I took a deep breath. "How would you feel about an employee ownership structure? You'd be the managing partner, but shares would be distributed among the long-term employees." Tony's eyes widened. "Seriously? That would be amazing, Jim, for everyone. It would need to be gradual, over 5 years or so. And there would be conditions, maintaining our quality standards, keeping the Harrington name, retaining current employees." "Of course, absolutely. And the Route 17 property wouldn't be included." "I have other plans for that." Tony nodded, too overwhelmed to question further. "For the next month, I worked with Howard to implement our plans. We created the employee ownership structure for Harrington Construction. We established a foundation that would receive the Route 17 property, with the mandate to develop affordable housing for seniors and veterans, a cause Margaret and I had long supported. We revised our will, leaving Michael a modest inheritance, but directing the bulk of our personal assets to charities we believed in and to a trust for our grandchildren's education. We also established clear directives for our care as we aged, naming trusted friends, not Michael, as our healthcare proxies. Throughout this process, Michael called repeatedly, alternating between apologetic overtures and subtle pressure to reconsider his offers. We maintained a polite distance, neither accepting nor completely rejecting his attempts at reconciliation. 6 weeks after our dinner at Le Bernardin, we invited Michael to our home. He arrived looking confident, clearly believing time had softened our stance. "Mom, Dad," he greeted us warmly. "You both look great. How are you feeling, Mom?" "Stronger every day," Margaret replied, her tone pleasant but reserved. I led him into the living room where Howard Kleinman waited, a portfolio of documents on the coffee table. Michael's smile faltered. "What's this? Please sit down," I said. "We have some things to discuss." Over the next hour, Howard explained the changes we'd made, the employee ownership plan for Harrington Construction, the foundation that would develop the Route 17 property into affordable housing, the revised inheritance structure. With each revelation, Michael's expression darkened. "You can't be serious," he finally exploded. "You're giving away millions, to employees, to strangers, to people who have earned our trust," Margaret corrected gently, "to causes we believe in. This is insane. I'm your son, your only child." "Yes, you are," I acknowledged. "And you'll still inherit a significant sum. But we've built our lives on certain values, Michael. Hard work, loyalty, integrity. We're allocating our assets according to those same values." He turned to Howard. "This can't be legal. They're elderly, I'll contest it." Howard smiled thinly. "I've ensured everything is quite sound legally, and your parents have undergone thorough cognitive assessment as part of this process. They're of completely sound mind. So this is it. You're punishing me because I fell in love with someone else, because I want a different life than the one you planned for me. No, Michael, Margaret said softly. We're acknowledging that you've chosen a path very different from what we hoped, one that doesn't align with how we want our legacy used. And we're protecting ourselves, I added, from someone who'd try to sell our home and business out from under us to fund his affair. He stood abruptly. You'll regret this. Both of you, probably, I agreed. Parents usually regret discovering their child isn't who they believed him to be. After Michael stormed out, Howard gathered his papers. He might still try to contest, but he won't succeed. Thank you, Howard, for everything. Left alone, Margaret and I sat in silence for a long while, the weight of what we'd done, the final acknowledgement that our son had betrayed us beyond repair, settling around us like a heavy blanket. Do you think he'll ever understand? Margaret finally asked. I don't know, I hope someday he will. Me too, she reached for my hand, but either way we did the right thing. We did. The months that followed were difficult. Michael cut off contact completely. We learned through Rebecca that he had indeed filed for divorce and moved in with Vanessa. We sent birthday cards to our grandchildren, but received no response. Yet alongside the pain, there was unexpected joy. The employee ownership transition at Harrington Construction energized the company. The foundation broke ground on the first phase of affordable housing on the Route 17 property. Margaret and I found new purpose in mentoring young contractors and nurses, sharing the knowledge we'd accumulated over decades. 1 year after Margaret's surgery, we hosted a celebration at our home, part anniversary, part gratitude for her recovery. Our house filled with friends, colleagues, former patients she'd cared for, Tony Rodriguez and his family, Howard Kleinman and his wife, Rebecca and the grandchildren, their first visit in months. As we stood on our back patio, watching the sunset with glasses of champagne, Rebecca approached me. James, I thought you should know, Michael's company is downsizing, he's been let go. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. It's been coming for a while. His judgment hasn't been the best lately, she hesitated. Vanessa left him last week. Apparently he's not as wealthy as she'd hoped. I felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication, sadness, concern. How is he taking it? Poorly, but maybe it will be a wake-up call. I nodded, unsure what to say. Part of me still loved my son despite everything. Part of me wanted him to suffer the consequences of his actions. Both could be true simultaneously. 3 days later, a letter arrived from Michael. Not an email or text, but a handwritten letter on heavy stationery. Dear Mom and Dad, I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, but I need to write it anyway. I've lost everything. My job, my relationship with Vanessa, my self-respect, and most importantly, my relationship with you both. I've spent the past year telling myself I was the victim, that you didn't understand me, that you were punishing me for wanting something different. But the truth, which I'm finally facing, is that I betrayed everyone who ever cared about me. I put my selfish desires above my commitments, above decency itself. I'm not writing to ask for money or for you to change your decisions about the company or your will. Those were your decisions to make, and I see now they were the right ones. I'm writing to say I'm sorry, deeply, genuinely sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I haven't earned it. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what you tried to teach me all those years, about integrity, loyalty, and the true meaning of success. With love and regret, Margaret read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Do you think he means it? I don't know, I said honestly. People can change when they hit rock bottom, or they can just get better at pretending to change. What should we do? I considered carefully. We could invite him for dinner, just dinner, not to fix everything overnight, but to see if there's anything left to rebuild. She nodded. I'd like that. We sent the invitation, and a week later, Michael sat at our dining room table, humbled and uncertain in a way I'd never seen him. The conversation was awkward, tentative. We avoided difficult subjects, sticking to safe topics, the weather, sports, books we'd read recently. But as we finished dessert, Margaret's apple pie, always Michael's favorite, he looked up with tears in his eyes. I waited all day at the hospital door when Emily was born, he said suddenly. Rebecca was in labor for 22 hours. I was terrified something would go wrong. He swallowed hard. And then I didn't show up for Mom's surgery. My own mother, I'll never forgive myself for that. It was a choice, I said, not unkindly, one of many. I know, he wiped his eyes. I've made so many wrong choices. I don't know if I can fix any of it. Margaret reached across the table to touch his hand. Fixing begins with acknowledging what's broken. You've taken that step. It's a start, I agreed cautiously. Just a start. After Michael left, Margaret and I sat on the porch swing, her head resting on my shoulder as we looked out at the garden she'd tended for decades. Do you think we can trust him again? She asked. I don't know. Trust is earned slowly and lost quickly, but not impossible to rebuild. No, I conceded, not impossible. We sat in companionable silence as the evening settled around us. The future with Michael remained uncertain, a fragile possibility rather than a guaranteed reconciliation. But Margaret and I had each other, our health, our home, and the legacy we'd protected. We'd faced the hardest betrayal and survived it together, stronger for having confronted the truth rather than hiding from it. Sometimes, the most painful revelations lead to the most necessary changes. Sometimes midnight brings not just darkness but clarity. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.